In today's video, I'm going to talk about one of the frequently asked questions I see come in on the channel. This is whether or not you should buy a Fender Telecaster or a Fender Strat. And this isn't going to be a straight up comparison in the conventional sense. I'm going to talk about this from experience, being that I was a Strat player for many years before I kind of jumped ship to a Telecaster, and now I kind of play them both. So I've kind of done a bit of a 180 and I can appreciate both guitars. We're going to talk about the pickups on both of these instruments and the pros and cons of each, the overall handling and playing experience of both of these guitars, because that's quite a bit different, and what you should go for if you're on the fence and you can't decide between either. Let's get into it. Let's kick things off talking about the tone of each of these guitars, and we're going to start with the neck pickup on each, because I'm going to talk about which one I prefer and why, and then also some of the variants in this as well. So generally speaking, anytime I go to buy a Telecaster, or if I'm playing a Telecaster that I love on the neck pickup, I kind of want it to sound almost like a Strat, and that might sound a little counterintuitive, but some of the early 50s Telecaster pickups have a very rolled out high end, and it's not very pleasing to the ear, whereas the Strat neck pickup has a lot more sizzle. Now, a good Telecaster neck pickup should also have snap on the high end. So if you're buying a Telecaster for the first time, you got to make sure that neck pickup has some similarities to how great a Strat neck pickup sounds. If it doesn't, you might not be happy with it and you might end up replacing it down the track. But let's have a listen to both the neck pickup on both the Telecaster and Stratocaster, and then we'll talk about the results. Now, in this particular clip, I was using the Fender Player 2, Tele, and Strat that I had on loan a little while ago, rather than my two guitars here with different types of pickups. So they're two guitars from exactly the same range, and I'm going to give the neck pickup win to the Stratocaster. For those folks who are huge fans of blues players, especially who like to live on that neck pickup, the Stratocaster would be the easy choice. Now, that's not to say you can't get a really great neck pickup tone out of a Tele, but it's generally easier, in my experience over many years now, to find that tone in a Strat over a Telecaster. Now let's talk about the middle position on both guitars. So on a Telecaster, it's both pickups together, and this gives you an advantage. But on the Stratocaster, it's just the single middle pickup on its own. Now the advantage of the Telecaster in this position is, generally speaking, it will be hum cancelling, which means if you're playing with a lot of drive, or if you're playing at a venue or at home where there's inherently a lot of buzz, you now have a get out of jail free card when it comes to the hum, and this can be great, especially if you're playing out live. The position of both pickups on a Telecaster will inherently give you a little bit more snap, but that's not to say you don't get snap out of the Tele. There's just a little bit more of a round sound with this position on a Telecaster. Let's have a listen. Now, if you aspire to play any sort of finger picking stuff, country music, or just really great rhythm guitar clean, I'm going to give the win here to the Telecaster, but you can be the judge. When I think of a middle pickup on a Stratocaster, I generally think of a really great sort of old school rock and roll rhythm tone. And you might prefer this. There's nothing wrong with that. I really like the tone of the middle pickup. I think it's arguably the most underrated position on a Strat, but I'm still giving the win, in this case, to the Tele. Now let's talk about the bridge pickup, which is this one on both guitars. Now, to get into bridge position, the toggle switch will be all the way down, or if you're looking at it like this, it'll be towards the side here. And this is the same on the Stratocaster. Now, the bridge pickup gives you less bass, more treble, and a more gnarly tone than neck pickup. Neck pickup has that smooth sound. Bridge pickup has a gnarly tone. Let's take a listen. right, let's talk about the results here. So just to the ear test, I think they both sounded really nice with exactly the same tone. So that's a good thing, but it's generally easier to find a much better bridge pickup on a Telecaster than on a Strat. Much like how we spoke about the neck pickup on Italian Strat being vastly different a lot of the time, I still find this to be the case between the Tele and the Strat bridge pickup. So generally speaking, if you're thinking about buying a Strat and you love that bridge pickup tone, test it out completely. Make sure that it doesn't sound too anemic. It should have a steely sort of overtone to it as well, much like how a Telecaster would sound. They're still going to sound different. Don't think they're going to sound the same. Much like the neck pickups, there's always a little bit of difference there. But when it comes to the bridge pickup, you definitely want it to sound like far from anemic is my suggestion. And if you can find a Strat with that type of bridge pickup, it's going to sound awesome. Now let's talk about the advantages to the Stratocaster over a Tele. So the cool thing about a Strat is it gives you 5 inherent pickup combinations. So you can go neck, middle, and bridge on their own, but you can also combine neck and middle and bridge together, giving you 2 additional combinations over that of the Telecaster. And anytime I'm thinking about these in-between positions, I'm thinking of guys like Mark Knopfler or Robert Cray, John Mayer, all these kind of dudes. There's a million dudes who play those in-betweens, but Robert Cray and Mark Knopfler would definitely be the 2 that I think about the most because they've got such unique tones and they always love using Strats in those in-between positions. Now let's talk about a few of the intangibles with both of these guitars. We're going to talk about tuning stability, playability, feel, all that kind of stuff. So just in terms of a guitar being comfortable to play, I have to give the win to the Strat. We get this nice belly contour here that makes it really comfortable if you plan on sitting and playing or standing and playing too. And it's also got a contour up here, which makes it more comfortable for your arms. So they really did refine the classic Telecaster design when it comes down to it. I also love the fact we get this section cut out here as well. It also slightly makes it easier to get up higher to the edge of the fretboard here. But overall, in terms of just its feel, I'm going to give the win to the Stratocaster. You know, the modernized shape of the 50s, I guess. Now, it's not really that modern, but having all these belly cuts and so forth just makes it a more pleasant experience to play. The win for function, form, and tuning stability all go to the Telecaster. There's no 2 or 6 point floating tremolo on this guitar. Once you string it through the back here, put it over the bridge, tune it up, you're in business. That's it. These hardly ever go out of tune. Whereas if you get a Stratocaster off the wall, for example, you're going to have tuning stability issues unless you set up that floating tremolo properly. Now, of course, if you've got a Strat and you know what you're doing and you've had it set up, it's going to be very reliable, but I've set my trem up with an extra spring in the back. So if I'm bending notes, doesn't matter how many I bend, it never moves, which gives me a similar experience to the Telecaster. If I want to use the whammy bar arm, I can use it, but I'm sort of pulling the trem up off the body of the guitar as opposed to it floating right in the middle, which would generally move if I'm bending notes like this, for example. For those who set up a Stratocaster in a very similar way where it's not moving unless you use the whammy bar arm, then you're going to be in business. But if you're new to playing guitar, this might do your head in after a while, and I highly recommend maybe asking the shop or tech or whoever's there to perhaps set it up for you so it's not moving unless you use the arm. And this isn't completely hardtailed, so this does still work, but I have to use the whammy bar to push the trem up off the body. And I much prefer this. It just keeps the tuning stability at a 9 out of 10 versus maybe a 4 out of 10. All right, let's talk about which guitar you should buy if you're on the fence between a Strat and a Tele. We're going to start with the Strat because back when I was learning all my blues stuff, back in the day I was doing my live shows, everything I listened to was basically on a Strat. And that was the biggest influence for me. It was the sound I was the most familiar with, and all the blues guys were playing Strats, so I figured maybe the Strat's the way to go. And I'm glad I did that. It gave me a good understanding of tone, and also how to dial in the sound of a Strat to match kind of what I was hearing on the album. So if you're a bigger fan of what you hear out of a Stratocaster, go for a Strat. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. While I did ditched them for a few years. I I kind of crawled back to them after a while when I found this one, because this sort of ticked all the boxes for me personally. I love this guitar, and yeah, it's a pleasure to play, which is something that, you know, I struggled to find for a long time as a lefty. If you're a right-hander, you won't have the same inherent issues I've got. But yeah, Strat will definitely give you those iconic sounds you hear on the albums or live shows, whatever. And if you like that, the Strat's the way to go. If you're a fan of simplicity and you never want to use the whammy bar or anything like that, get a Telecaster. The Tele sounds so good, and even if you're playing blues or whatever the style of music you're playing, there's generally less people playing Telecasters in blues circles than there might be Stratocaster players. It's just the way that it is. It is shifting slightly, but I still see more Strats out there around the blues circuits than I see Telecasters. And Teles just have that inherent gnarly bridge pickup tone that you generally won't find on a Stratocaster. While the neck pickups are a bit hit and miss on some Teles, if you find one that you love, like I did with this one, you're never going to have to change the pickups. It's going to give you really great tones, and that middle position is also great for funk or rock or whatever. You can basically do anything on it. But yeah, it's a great guitar. It's very simple. One tone control is also something I prefer. There's no reason Strats should still have two tone controls on them all the time. I don't think most people use the first tone control that much. I think most people use the bridge tone control, and I just think they got this right back in the day. It's really cool, and while it might not be quite as comfortable to play as a Strat, it's still an absolutely killer guitar. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. My name's Shane. I will catch you on the next one. See ya.